The day began like any other, or so we thought. The sun rose, but it was a strange, angry red. A deep hum started, not in the air, but in the ground beneath our feet. It was a low growl, a vibration that shook you to your very bones. Animals were the first to know. Birds stopped singing, dogs whined and hid. They felt the planet's fever before we did. The air itself felt thick, heavy with something we couldn't name. A sense of wrongness settled over everything. This wasn't just a storm coming. This was something else entirely. This was the end of the line. Then the shit started for real. Not like an earthquake. This was different. It was a slow, sickening lurch. The ground softened, like mud. I looked out my window. My neighbor's fence was leaning at a crazy angle. The road had cracked down the middle. It wasn't just breaking, it was sinking. The hum grew louder, a constant, terrifying noise. People came out of their houses, looking confused, looking scared. Their faces were pale. They were trying to understand what was happening. But there was no explanation, only the cold, hard reality of a world coming apart at the seams. I knew I had to move. Instinct takes over in moments like these. Your mind goes into survival mode. Forget plans. Forget possessions. You think about one thing, staying alive. But where do you go when the whole world is the danger zone? I grabbed a small bag, just the essentials. Water, a knife, a fire starter, though fire was about to be everywhere. It's what you do. You prepare, even when there's no hope. It's the will to live, etched deep inside us all. The ground groaned again, a sound of immense pain. A smell hit the air. Smoke. Not from a campfire or a house fire. This was the smell of the world itself beginning to burn. Small fires started to appear on the horizon like tiny orange flowers blooming against the dark, smoky sky. They weren't spreading from one place, they were just starting everywhere at once. The heat began to rise, even though the sun was now hidden by a thick, dark haze. The world was turning into an oven, and we were all trapped inside. The first chapter of our final day had begun, written in fear and fire. The sinking got worse. Fast, entire buildings began to tilt, groaning under the strain. They slid into the soft earth like toys pushed into sand. Roads buckled and vanished into deep, muddy pits. The solid ground we had trusted our whole lives was gone. It had become a hungry mouth, swallowing everything we had ever built. The noise was incredible, a constant roar of grinding rock, snapping metal, and the deep, terrifying rumble of the planet itself. It was a symphony of destruction, and it was playing its final note. Survival is about adapting, but how do you adapt to this? Fire was everywhere. It erupted from the cracks in the ground, shooting up like geysers of liquid flame. Forests on distant hills burst into fire all at once, turning the horizon into a wall of orange and black. The heat was immense. It baked the air, making it hard to breathe. Ash fell like a dirty gray snow, covering everything in a layer of grime. The world was being consumed by two forces at once. The ground was pulling it down, and the fire was burning it up. It was a brutal, unstoppable combination. A true battle for survival against nature's final furious act. The sounds were a nightmare. On top of the planet's deep groan and the roar of the flames, you could hear the sounds of our world dying. The sharp crack of trees exploding from the heat. The hiss of water turning to steam as rivers boiled away. The crash of cities collapsing into the earth. And underneath it all, a new sound began to rise. The sound of people. Shouts. Cries. A collective wail of 7 billion souls facing the abyss. It was the most heartbreaking sound I have ever heard. A chorus of loss and terror echoing across a dying land. The sky was no longer blue. It was a canvas of chaos. Thick black smoke swirled with angry red light from the fires below. It was dark as night, but a terrifying, glowing kind of night. There were no stars, no moon, just the suffocating blanket of smoke and ash. Sometimes a piece of a falling satellite or a meteor would streak through the haze, a fleeting silver tear in the darkness. The air tasted of sulfur and burning plastic. Breathing was like swallowing knives. This was the environment of the apocalypse. Hostile, deadly, absolute. In the middle of the chaos, you see what people are made of. Fear was everywhere. You could see it in their eyes. A raw, primal terror. Many were frozen, unable to move, simply staring as the world ended around them. They were overwhelmed by the sheer scale of it. Others ran. They ran without direction, without a destination, driven by the simple animal need to escape. But there was nowhere to run. The danger was not in one place. It was the place itself. It was a hard lesson to learn on the final day. But then you saw other things. You saw courage. I saw a woman run back into a tilting house, not for things, but for her neighbor, an old man who couldn't walk. She pulled him out just as the roof collapsed. I saw a man sharing his last bottle of water with a crying child he didn't even know. These small acts of bravery, of kindness, shone like stars in the smoky darkness. In the face of total annihilation, some people chose to be their best selves. They chose to help. They showed that the human spirit is a powerful force, even at the end. People tried to save what mattered most. It was never money. It was never cars or televisions. They grabbed photo albums. They held their children's hands tighter than ever before. They searched for their pets. They called out the names of their loved ones, their voices filled with desperation and hope. In these final moments, we were all stripped down to our core. We remembered what was truly important. It was not what we owned. It was who we loved. That was the only treasure worth saving from the fire. Sadness was a heavy cloak over everyone. Tears cut clean paths through the ash on people's faces. The loss was too big to comprehend. The loss of homes, of cities, of history, the loss of the future. But even in the sadness, there was connection. Strangers hugged each other, sharing their grief. People sat together watching the world burn, finding comfort in not being alone. They told stories. They sang songs. They held on to each other as the ground gave way beneath them. They faced the end not as individuals, but as a species, united in a final tragic moment. As the hours passed, the destruction became absolute. The world was a ruin. The great mountains were sinking. The oceans had boiled away into a thick, hot steam that choked the air. The fire was no longer in patches. It was a single, global inferno. The ground was a sea of molten rock, a slow-moving river of lava that consumed the last standing remnants of our civilization. The noise was a constant, deafening roar. It was the sound of a planet's death rattle. There was no high ground left, no safe place to hide. This was the endgame. I found a spot on a crumbling piece of rock, one of the last islands in a sea of fire. The heat was unbearable. My energy was gone. There is a point in any survival situation where you know the fight is over. You have done everything you can. You have pushed your body and spirit to the limit. Now, all that is left is to face what is coming. There was a strange peace in that acceptance. The fear was gone, replaced by a profound sense of clarity. The struggle was over. It was time to witness the end. I looked around one last time. I saw the skeletons of skyscrapers reaching up from the lava like broken fingers. I saw the sky, a burning ceiling of red and black. I thought about my life, the adventures, the challenges, the people I loved, the beauty I had seen in the world before it turned to this. I thought about the simple things, the feeling of cool water on a hot day, the sound of laughter, the comfort of a hug. These were the things that flashed before my eyes, not the triumphs, but the connections. In the end, that's all that matters. When everything is stripped away, your home, your world, your future, the only thing that has any value is love. The love you gave and the love you received. It's the one thing the fire cannot burn and the sinking ground cannot swallow. It's the final currency. As the rock I stood on finally began to crumble, that was my last thought. The greatest survival tool we ever had was not a knife or a fire starter. It was our ability to care for one another. That is the one thing worth holding on to right until the very last second.